Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 114 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening, deep into the night here into Monday in mid-November, and I am joined, as I always am, by Scott Coleman. Scott, we're on your time right now. What's going on?
Hey, Brad. Others may sleep, but you never sleep. You are a madman doing this deep into the night. We'll probably wrap this show up about midnight Eastern, which is par for the course. And hey, maybe the Braves will help kind of thaw out the league-wide, I don't even know the right word for it, glacial pace of this offseason so far. And crazy enough, it's kind of nuts to say the Braves have actually done more than like 90% of the teams in baseball so far. So I know a few people reached out to me today of like, oh my God, is anything ever going to happen with the offseason? The answer is yes at some point, but who knows? It might be a little while before we get some action.
That is definitely right, and I'm glad you said that because people have said the same thing to me, like, all right, it's moving really slow, and I have to remind them just exactly what you said. Like, the Braves have actually, not that they've spoiled us too much, but they've done some stuff, and most teams have not done anything to this point. I'm looking as an experiment, as you were talking, at the front page of ESPN's MLB coverage right now, and the first headline on the right is about a Ted Williams MVP award selling for some amount of money. And the second one is Brewster Gratterall's shoulder injury for the Dodgers. That kind of tells you where we are at this stage on Sunday evening into Monday. And we'll get into a lot of stuff on the podcast today. By the way, we should say at the top of the show, we are part of Foul Territory as a network. Please subscribe, rate, and review the Hammer Territory podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple and Spotify and Overcast, all those places. Plus, we're on YouTube if you want to watch Scott and myself and Sean and Steven in video form. And we have been busy on the show. We did 3 episodes last week, even though the Braves have been pretty quiet. We talked about the exit of Travis d'Arnaud from the Braves to the Angels, a big change in the Braves TV landscape. For those of us that are not like Scott and can't just watch the Braves on MLB.tv, it'd be a lot easier if we were able to do that locally in the market, Scott. But anyway, there's been a lot going on, even if there has not been anything going on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to just quickly note, I know you and I don't believe have done a show since Travis d'Arnaud signed with the Angels. Good for Travis to get the $12 million guarantee. I think you and I and most people were surprised that the Braves declined his $8 million option. Of course, we've talked about it a lot on the podcast network, especially Steven and Sean did a great show a couple of nights ago. But it's going to be weird. I mean, Travis has kind of, I guess, quietly been with the organization since 2020. Was a very, very good baseball player for the Atlanta Braves. Everybody around the team raved about Travis and what he did, not only on the field, but in the clubhouse and working with the pitching staff. So a significant loss. And I'm very curious to see what, if anything, the Braves do to add to the second catcher spot on the roster, or if they decide to just go internal with Chadwick Trump, maybe Drake Baldwin. But you and I think, would be remiss to not just give Travis a farewell and a best wishes. Good for him. He's going to be reunited with some Braves, and it sounds like he's going to have a chance to play quite a bit between catching duties and DH duties with the Angels.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Travis. That's the best way to put that. And he was a key piece of the team that won the World Series. He caught, I think, every inning or close to it in the World Series run. Like he was on the field a lot, including for the clincher, et cetera. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy for the Braves, I'm sure, to let him go. I'm sure in fact, I know that they love Travis, but perhaps, as we'll talk about later on in this episode, we talked about relief pitching and they have other holes they have to fill, and they chose to maybe use that money elsewhere, and Travis pivots and gets more money guaranteed, and that's the way it's supposed to work in some respects. But yeah, big shout out to Travis d'Arnaud. If you want more on that, definitely listen to the show that Sean and Steven did last week. Most of this episode that we're about to do is going to be about relief pitchers, which is not always the sexiest thing in the world. I will certainly acknowledge that, but it is an important thing, and the Braves have valued it at a very high level. Before we get to that, though, there is a little bit of a sparkler of news, or not even really news, but like rumbling, rumor, however you want to put that, Scott, in the last few days. Our old pal, John Morosi, I'm not quite as close to John Morosi as I am to John Heyman, my actual old pal, John Heyman. But Morosi reported Braves having interest in Walker Buehler. We did talk about Walker Buehler extensively, or at least for a few minutes, on the starting pitcher free agent show that you and I did about a week ago, basically. So just listen to that for a big picture take on that. But I think we agreed on that episode even. It'd be very Alex Anthopoulos to go out and sign Walker Buehler. What did you make of this, and how much stock do you put it into it in mid-November?
Yeah, I will say the interest in Walker Buehler was not a big surprise to me anyway. As we kind of outlined a few episodes ago, there is familiarity with Alex Anthopoulos and Walker Buehler. He is a high pedigree guy. Once upon a time was very, very good for the Dodgers, and then had his second Tommy John surgery, and frankly was just not very good this past season. But as the playoffs rounded form, and I think as the Dodgers got deeper into the postseason, they clearly trusted Walker Buehler, and I believe he got the final 3 outs of the World Series clincher, and the stuff is still pretty good. So I think as we have come to talk this offseason, the Braves have to add at least one starting pitcher, if not 2. And I think Buehler, especially if you can tell yourself a story of he's going to be even more distance from his elbow surgery come spring training and, of course, throughout the season, if Buehler's willing to take a 1-year option or a 1-year deal, or maybe a 1-year deal with an option, maybe even a 2-year deal, I think that's something the Braves will be interested in. And he, with maybe a half dozen others who are all going to command kind of similar money, maybe in that $15 to $20 million range per year, I think that's kind of the range the Braves are going to be looking at. And even though we heard Walker Buehler's name publicly, I'm sure that Alex Anthopoulos has gone and talked to agents for quite a few starting pitchers so far.
Yeah, and there's always this debate. We don't have to have it now about whether the Braves ever leak anything, right? Every time there's a name that pops up, there's an argument on social media like the Braves never leak anything. Look, the Braves have done a very good job not leaking things. That is well documented, but they also don't. It's not that they never leak anything. Like, stuff gets out. Like, it's usually not from them, I would say. It's usually from the agent side.
Sure.
But it's not like the Braves bat 1,000 on never leaking anything. Some of their moves do get leaked ahead of time. Interest does get leaked ahead of time. Last year, for instance, Aaron Nola, the interest there got very widely reported, and Alex came out and publicly, in a way he didn't have to, confirm that it was accurate. He actually said, we were interested in Aaron Nola all the way through. So it does leak out sometimes. I believe the interest. How serious it is, we just don't know. And Morosi didn't say like the Braves are like right in it on. He just mentioned them on a list of teams with Walker Buehler. It's not anything crazy, but it is by the standards of right now newsy, considering there's not that much going on, and he was the only guy that. So I mean, there was one link of like maybe 2 weeks ago to other pitchers. Nathan Eovaldi was brought up as we discussed a week ago, but since then it's basically just been, hey, Buehler interest, and we'll see if that actually makes any difference in a few weeks.
And I get it. Like, there's a big business behind clicks and needing things to talk about. I mean, hell, it makes our podcasts a lot easier when there are.
Yeah, we're talking about it right now for that reason, basically.
Right.
So it is what it is.
Exactly. But I always, when I see the headline of team is interested in starting pitcher or team is having conversations with the agent for a starting pitcher, of course they are. We're in the offseason, Brad. That's what they do. I mean, in order to even facilitate the idea of a signing or a trade, you have to reach out and get an idea for what kind of contract the pitcher's looking for. If there's a geography preference, some guys want to pitch on the east. Some guys want to pitch out west. Some guys want to pitch where it's warm. Some guys want to pitch near Arizona where there's spring training, or Florida where there's spring training. It happens. I sound like a ranting old boomer right now, but yes, it was at least out there. We wanted to talk about it because it is pretty rare, as you said. We don't get a ton of rumors and leaks like we used to in the John Coppolella days, where it was like every 5 minutes there was seemingly something going on. But nonetheless, Walker Buehler, a name to keep an eye on, and he does feel like he would check off some boxes for the Braves if they ultimately get to that point.
For sure. So that's the name to monitor. And we listed a bunch more names on that show a week ago, and maybe they'll throw a curveball and trade for somebody that we never even discussed. That's what Alex tends to do. But that will be interesting for sure. We will be talking about relief pitchers in a second. And by the way, that has become much more of a need after the injury to Joe Jimenez. That's all coming up in a second. First, though, word from our partners on today's show.
I love a great deal, but I'm not going to run sprints in the outfield just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. With Mint Mobile, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan. Purchase and activation is super easy too.
To get started, go to mintmobile.com/territory. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/territory. That's mintmobile.com/territory. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/territory.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on their first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, Scott. Before we dive into some names on the relief pitching free agent market, and there are a bunch of them, we figured we start this off by talking about like why this matters, because on paper, the Braves were quite good in the bullpen last year, right? There wasn't like a huge need for them. They were awesome pitching-wise all the way across, and bullpen has been an emphasis for them under Alex Anthopoulos. The biggest thing to open up this discussion is that Joe Jimenez, who was, I think we agree on this, Scott, was basically elite last season, was tremendous.
Yeah. And
he's probably going to miss the whole season. He's injured. We discussed that a week or two ago now, but just as a reminder, he's out for the season, or at least probably most of the season, if nothing else.
Yeah, most of the season, I think, is what
it
was a weird.
It's most or all, basically. Like he might pitch in like August at the earliest, essentially, and could be not at all. And I think you got to plan on him not pitching at all. That'd be my guess. If he comes back, it's a nice cherry on top. But beyond that, and that's a huge loss of a guy who they're paying real money to, et cetera, et cetera. Longtime fixture AJ Minter is a free agent. So 2 of their top 3-4 relievers are either hurt or currently not going to be on the roster in April from last season. Plus, if you want to throw him in there, Jesse Chavez threw a lot of innings last year. He's probably going to retire, if not, and he's a free agent either way. That's a lot of innings that they do not have coming back, or maybe not coming back, depending on AJ. And as you I want to throw this to you now, the state of the bullpen is a little bit of a question mark. If you just take out Jimenez and Minter, it's not like it's going to be a disaster, I don't think. But I think if you follow Alex's previous work, I tend to believe he's not going to stand pat with the current allotment, factoring in Minter's potential defection and Jimenez's injury.
Yeah, so let's do kind of a quick state of the bullpen that is healthy and on the 40-man roster, or at least in the running to be an opening day bullpen option. And at the top, Raisel Iglesias, fantastic, has been very, very good ever since he came over from the Angels, and really his whole career. He's been a really good reliever. You have Iglesias in the 9th, and then you have Pierce Johnson, you have Aaron Bummer, and you have Dylan Lee, who are all locks for important roles of some kind, assuming they're healthy. Of course, you can never predict health. And that, that's kind of it, Brad, at least in my mind, for like the 4 rock solid, have done it for years, guys who you could presumably just write in pen on March 30th or whatever opening day is, that they're going to be with the big league team. And then there's a couple others on the periphery, and I'll toss it back to you. But, I mean, is that kind of where you're at with Iglesias, Johnson, Bummer, and Lee at this point?
Yeah, as far as the guys who you would say are locks to be there and you trust. There are other names for sure. I mean, I'm sure people are going to be yelling depending on how they feel about these guys. But you got Daysbel Hernandez, a guy that I know Braves fans have been quite high on. The Braves seem to be a little bit less high with their actions. But they do like him to some degree. He's around. He's a talented guy. You got Grant Holmes, who was awesome last year. He would be the one for me that if you said, okay, Grant Holmes is going to be a reliever only, he'd be 5th for me based on last season. He was good. He's more of a bulk guy in some respects, but he was quite good. But even then, he's kind of more on the margins. He's a little bit less safe than the other 4, it seems like. And then there's a pretty big drop off from there. You got Perdomo, who's on the 40-man roster. Like, they don't have a lot of options. Like, all these guys who were starters previously could be in the bullpen. They just claimed Roy Bayer Salinas. Like, they got some arms that could be on the 40-man that are. Ray Kerr is a potential bullpen option. They have some names. Griffin Canning could be in the bullpen. We don't know, but we agree there are 4 guys that they trust in the bullpen. If you remove Jimenez and Minter, and 4 is less than they want to have. I promise you that.
Yeah.
So, and look, bullpens, just to say it out loud, if you're a new listener, we always make this point, but bullpens are volatile. Relievers, not that they get hurt more than other pitchers, but like a good reliable bullpen guy might blow up on you, and you might get a reclamation project that's fantastic. Like, it is more volatile than most positions, so it's okay to have some flexibility and some volatility in your bullpen. But I think, look, we should just say this out loud. Alex likes to spend money on relievers. I think Alex likes to almost overload on bullpen. Like, I'm someone who likes to be cautious and like maybe have a more depth in pitching. And I've been like, man, Alex is spending a lot of money on relievers, and not in a bad way. It's just like, if anything, he tends to lean towards more safety in the bullpen and doubling up and tripling up. So the combination of those two things, Scott, only having 4 guys that we seem to like, and Alex's history where he took on huge money for Rysel. He's paying Jimenez real money. Pierce Johnson's making real money. Aaron Bummer's making real money. They want, like, I think the biggest free agent deal he's ever done still is Will Smith. Old pal Will Smith. They also paid Kenley Jansen. They paid Kirby Yates. Like, they've got a lot of money in the last 5 years spent and invested. And not even just obviously Iglesias is a closer, and so is Jansen. But a lot of these guys were like the 3rd or 4th relievers, and they were still paying them $7, $8, $9 million a year, and that's okay. But it just means that Alex likes to spend money there.
Yeah, Alex has never been shy on spending on the bullpen. I think you and I are probably in unison that we are okay with bullpen spending as long as the rest of the 18-man roster is in really good shape. And under Alex's tenure, it has been. And other than there's always a spot or two in the lineup that wants to, that you would like to be better. But for the most part, this is a very well-rounded roster and should be come spring training. So I don't have an issue with Alex going out and spending some money on a reliever or two. He could also always make a trade for someone. There are a couple of high-profile relievers who we talked about on the Trade Targets episode 2 weeks ago that I would encourage folks to check out if they missed it. But I think it's pretty clear as we list off here, you have 4 arms that if they are healthy, you trust. You can add in at least one of those names, I think, based on what Grant Holmes showed last season. And then Daysbel Hernandez has really good stuff, but I actually just wrote about Daysbel for Battery Power. Daysbel walked 14%. 14% of the batters he faced last season in both AAA and the major leagues. You can't walk that many hitters, Brad, and live to tell the tale. And presumably, if he was made a full-time reliever, I mean, generally big leaguers are, if he was made a full-time reliever in the major leagues, big leaguers have better plate discipline and command of the zone than minor leaguers do. So you can imagine what that number might look like if he threw 50 innings in the majors. I am still interested and bullish on Daysbel and love what Grant Holmes did last season. But I think it's pretty clear that they have to do at least something to address this unit. And like you said, if they get Joe Jimenez back at some point, it's a cherry on top. But it sounded like it was a pretty serious knee injury. And even the Braves were probably caught by surprise a little bit that it was as serious as it was.
Oh, they definitely were, it seems like. And I mean, he went in for a procedure, and by the reporting, they didn't know how bad it was till they got in there to fix it. And that was a surprise coming out of the surgery. Like, oh, by the way, he might have been out for a few months. Now he's going to be out for a year, potentially. That's a big loss. And again, not to overstate it, but, I think because of Alex's track record, we agree that they need to do something. And I think that I will be personally surprised if they don't make a relatively major bullpen move, whether signing someone or trading for someone. Do we agree on that, Scott, while we're here?
Yeah.
That would surprise me. I mean, I wouldn't fall on the floor and die, but I think based on history, Alex doing nothing of significance in the bullpen would be a surprise.
Well, and just to throw a scenario out there, say that Rysel Iglesias gets seriously hurt 2 weeks into the season.
It's
dear God,
it's dire. And look, we can actually let's just talk about him now. They could just sign AJ Minter, right? AJ Minter has some uncertainty because he had hip surgery in August. He missed the rest of the season. By what we've seen, I think he'll probably be ready to go in early season, maybe opening day. We don't really know the timeline on AJ, but He isn't the best reliever available, but he is one of the top 10 best relievers available on the market. He's been really good for a long time. He's 31 years old now, but the last 5 seasons, I pulled this number, he has an ERA and a FIP in the 2s. He's 12th in the major leagues in the last 5 years in Fangraphs WAR. He has been a borderline elite reliever for 5 years. Like, he's been a really good pitcher. He likes Atlanta. He said the right things. You never know how much that's going to matter, how much the Braves are going to offer AJ Minter. The injury thing really is a big point of uncertainty. If AJ was healthy, it's interesting because maybe he would be less likely to come back because he might get a bigger deal somewhere else if he had been healthy all year long. Or you could view it as maybe the Braves want to pay him more because he's going to be healthy. We don't know the answer to that, but there is more uncertainty. And like, he's been I think he only made the top 50 in one of the 3 major projections, MLB Trade Rumors, Fangraphs, and ESPN. It was like 2 years, $16 million total was projection. That sounds like an AJ Minter contract to me. I'm not going to claim to know for sure what he's going to make on the market because of the injury. But look, maybe they just press the AJ button and say, all right, AJ, come on back. We like your health. We like what we've seen so far. And we know you're good. He's not as good as Tanner Scott, probably the biggest high profile guy on the market. But like, there's a relationship there, and it wouldn't stun me if they just bring AJ back.
In terms of timing, the hip injury for AJ was just brutal.
Very.
If AJ Minter was healthy and didn't need the hip surgery and was coming off even like an average season for his standards, he's probably looking at a 3-year, $33 million deal, 4 years for 40, maybe even more than that.
Oh, but probably more than that. There's 4 or 5 guys that are projected on all these lists to get 4-year deals at big money, and he's as good as all of these guys when he's healthy. So like, yeah, I mean, and we didn't talk about this beforehand. All of these guys who are free agents are in their 30s. Just as a reminder to everybody, like, you don't get to free agency until your 30s unless you're an absolute freak like Juan Soto. Like, most guys are 31, 32 when they hit free agency. AJ's 31 years old, and he's made some decent money the last couple of years, but he's only made $15 million total in 6 major league seasons. This is when you make your money. And that's to the point about the timing. Like, of course, we like AJ as a Brave for this whole time. But man, just as a person in the world, like, to have that, like, he was almost certainly going to more than double his career earnings with a stroke of a pen. And he might still, but he's going to get less than he would have gotten if he was healthy.
Yeah. And it might work out to the Braves' advantage.
Yeah.
Because if he was coming off another mega year, I don't think they would be entertaining the idea of a 4-year deal for AJ. So maybe it'll work out. The one unknown is, what is his hip like? It was a pretty nasty injury from all reporting. There was talk that AJ was trying to gut through it and pitch through it over the summer months, but someone reported that he was having trouble even like walking up a flight of stairs at a point. I mean, how are you supposed to throw a baseball 95 miles an hour when you can't even walk upstairs without being in pain? So credit to AJ for gutting through it and trying to give the team everything he could. Ultimately, he had to have the surgery in August, and we'll see what the medicals look like. Maybe AJ and his agent are intentionally delaying his free agency just a little bit, just so his medicals come back better and cleaner, and teams might be a little more confident in that he is going to be available at the start of the season or close to it. But of all the names we're going to talk about tonight, I really do feel that AJ could be back with the Braves. And I mean, if I had to put a prediction on where AJ Minter is pitching next season, I would say Atlanta because of the familiarity. He's very good. There's a trust there. And but as you also said, he has not made boatloads of money to this point. And if the Braves are on like a 1-year, $7 million deal, and a team comes in at like 2 years and $20 million, I don't know, Brad. I mean, he has to take that. I mean, there might be a slight hometown discount for someone like AJ, but I use the word slight intentionally. Like, when you haven't made that much money in your career, and look, I don't expect fans to always agree with this. You want your team to win. I understand. I always try to give it a little bit of humanity with these guys are all humans. And if he's going to get paid half of what he's going to make somewhere else, he should leave. That's just what it is. Like, you're trying to be, so we'll see how that goes. But I want to talk about him first because, again, he probably isn't the best guy on the market by his contract projections, but he is very good when he is pitched. And as long as he is healthy, and that is a big if,
but if he's healthy, he would really help the bullpen. They know him. He likes it here, et cetera, et cetera. From there, there's like 4 guys that I could find on the projections that like seemingly are going to get big money. And let's just give a disclaimer now, Scott. I think we agree on this. You and I are not scholars on all of these pitchers. Relievers are volatile. We don't have the same level of takes on these guys as some of the other players. Is that fair to say? As starters, position players, like I know a lot, or at least I have more confidence in what I know about Willy Adames and Juan Soto than I do about Clay Holmes. Let's just say.
Sure. I can give you one sentence, like an educated 1-sentence opinion on Clay Holmes without doing 20 minutes of research. I could talk about Willy Adames because I'm a baseball fan and he's a star level player, et cetera, et cetera. I could talk about Willy Adames for, however long you would want to hear me rant about him. But yes, I think it's worth pointing out that as Brad and I list off, I don't know, Brad, a dozen names here, maybe 2 dozen that we're going to mention. All of these pitchers, they are relievers. They are volatile by nature. Some of them are going to continue to be great. Some of them are going to be bad. Relievers really are the most volatile group of players in baseball year over year. Only the great ones are consistently great, like an AJ Minter, who has been pretty great basically his whole career, and especially the last 3 or 4 seasons. It's really hard to do. And it's also, let's be real, for relievers, 3 or 4 appearances can be the difference between a great season and a not so great season, because if you give up 6 runs in 1 inning, it's going to kill your numbers for the rest of the year. So it's hardly an exact science. But clearly bullpens, the way they are used now in this modern era, you have to have a good bullpen if you're going to make a deep run in October. It is maybe not the one thing, Brad, that teams have to have in order to win a World Series and to win multiple rounds in the playoffs. But if you don't have a good bullpen, or at least a really good 4 or 5 relievers you can count on, it's really tough to advance deep into the playoffs without it.
Well, and look, Braves fans should remember very well, their bullpen in 2021 was arguably the number one reason why they won the World Series. Having the night shift, as they call it, when your bullpen gets a name, it's usually a good sign. You know what I mean?
God,
and those guys were so incredibly dominant that entire run that is a big reason why they won the World Series. And that's undeniable. And look, it's lightning in a bottle in some respects. Tyler Matzik has never been that good before or since, but he was for that little stretch of time. Luke Jackson, all those guys were great at that. Will Smith did not allow an earned run in the playoffs.
After nearly giving us a heart attack every time he took the mound for 6 months. And then
volatility.
He turned into Mariano Rivera for the month of October.
Correct.
And God bless him, because he's a hero in all of our hearts. But yes, it is.
So that's why you load up on bullpens. Like, you load up, you could do as much as you possibly can. And that seems to be what Alex's philosophy is do as much as you possibly can, and then let the variance, let go and let God, and see what happens from there. But anyway, aside from AJ, there are 4 guys who it seems like it'll be a surprise based on the projections if they don't get at least 8 figures per season on some length of deal. And they are, in no order, Tanner Scott, Jeff Hoffman, who's kind of a hybrid. We'll talk about him in a second. Clay Holmes, and Blake Trinan. Those guys all have solid 8-figure, $10+ million AAV projections. Tanner Scott's kind of in his own tier from what it looks like from the projections. He's projected to get 4 years from all 3 of ESPN, MLB Trade Rumors, and Fangraphs for like $15 million-ish a year. That's a lot of money for a relief pitcher. He's a 30-year-old lefty. He has been really awesome the last 2 years. Based on what I just told you, Scott, it seems, this is me talking now, I will be surprised if they sign Tanner Scott, because it feels like there's going to be a bidding war for Tanner Scott. And I don't think the Braves are in a position to win a bidding war when they already are paying Iglesias $16 million a year.
Yeah. And they already have 2 good lefties in Dylan Lee and Aaron Bummer. So, yes, of all these names.
Plus AJ, if they want to bring back AJ too, it's like there's no chance they're going to sign Tanner Scott and AJ. That's not happening. But
or even Angel Perdomo, who we talked about at the top of the show. Perdomo, for those who don't know, quickly, he has wicked stuff. He's gigantic. He's like 6'8". He's a lefty, but he's basically thrown like 40 innings since 2021 with some injuries. The Braves signed Perdomo last winter with the idea that he will be, well, they knew that he was not going to pitch in 2024. he could also be part of the 2025 bullpen mix. So yes, if they're going to invest in a reliever, I'm pretty confident it would be, other than AJ Minter, of these names, it would be one of the righties.
Yeah, so Scott's number one on most lists, but I think it wouldn't make a ton of sense on some level. Jeff Hoffman has some Ronaldo Lopez vibes for this reason. He's a 31-year-old right-hander. He has made 50 starts in the major leagues. He hasn't been a starter for several years now, but he was great in Philadelphia as a reliever the last 2 years. And I know Philadelphia is going to be a repellent for a lot of people, but these guys are pros. It is what it is. He commanded great last year. I don't know if he's going to be a starting option for somebody somewhere, but it wouldn't stun me if a team was like, you know what? If we could sign him to a reliever contract and have him be a starter, a la what the Braves did with Ronaldo Lopez, they're paying him. And by the way, they're still paying Ronaldo reliever money to be a high-end starter. And that's a great thing to have happen. I'm not saying that's going to happen for Jeff Hoffman, but if he's a reliever, he's already good. And there's a little bit of a twinge of could he start for somebody that makes him interesting. And I think Braves, I've heard from people already, people in our lot. I think even I don't want to say this. I think Sean is a Jeff Hoffman guy. Somebody that I talked to is a Jeff Hoffman guy. They're like, hey, look, everything I see on the numbers, I don't enjoy watching the Braves face Jeff Hoffman. He's good. So sign me up. It's just, we'll see.
The last 2 seasons, Jeff Hoffman has been legitimately like a top 5-ish reliever in baseball, and he doesn't close, or he doesn't close in a full-time capacity. So it's not like he's one of these guys who have 50 saves and everybody acknowledges him as, oh yeah, he is the guy. This past season, he was worth 2 WAR as a reliever and only closed out 10 games for the Phillies. So that kind of speaks to how good Hoffman is. I'm sure that his agent is trying to sell Hoffman as a Ronaldo Lopez type, as if it's easy to just roll out of bed and have a 2 ERA over 28 starts and, nothing to it. I started baseball games once. I can do it again. Hey, if the Braves want to go after Hoffman, and I don't really care what role it would be. If they want to try to make him a hybrid starter, go for it. If he's good, you've done it again. If he stinks, you have an elite right-handed arm. Maybe he wants to close. That's the only thing I can maybe think of. He might be looking for closer money and a closer role. But if he doesn't care, Jeff Hoffman's as good as it gets among right-handed relievers, and I'd be down for paying him to if the price was reasonable, we'll say.
Yeah, we agree there for sure. There is some flexibility. Just want to at least note that he's the only guy on this little mini list that has that potential to stretch out a little bit if he wants to. Mentioned before, Clay Holmes, 32-year-old righty from the Yankees. He's been good and consistent the last 3 years. And Blake Treinen is older. He's 36. Man, he's been awesome for the last 4 years with the Dodgers. I kind of was amazed by the numbers. He has a 2.29 ERA in the last 5 seasons combined with the Dodgers. He's old, though. He's 36. Not a closer probably at this stage of his career, but hey, that could be another look. The Braves like old guys. The Braves like maybe a short-term deal would be like some of these guys, Hoffman, Holmes, Scott, they might want 3 or 4. They might prioritize length of their contract. They're at that age where you might want 4 years. The Braves probably don't want to give those guys 4 years. Maybe they will. Treinen's not a 4-year guy. It might be a 2 for 28 kind of thing or something like that. That's a lot of money for a reliever, but if he's pitching like the way he's been pitching the last couple of years, it's a bargain.
Yeah. And, as we progress through the winter, I'm curious just how many relievers Alex think he needs to add.
Yeah.
Now, there's always the basically the free flyers that teams will take. Ken Giles was that guy last year for the Braves.
There will be some of those. I promise you that. I was going to say 2 or 3 guys. I've heard of that guy before.
There are always veterans in February who get an invite. 80, 90% of the time they don't work out, but every now and then you strike gold with Tyler Matzik, who was basically a nobody and then went on a historic year run, and the rest is history. So I think the conversation the Braves might be having is, okay, we could add 1 top-tier arm for X million dollars, or we could go into maybe the 2nd or 3rd or 4th tiers of free agency, find some guys we really like and add 2 or 3 of them and hope that one of them takes the next step forward. As we said earlier, relievers, they're an interesting group. They're great, and then they're terrible, and then they're great again, and then they're terrible again. So I think in the way this bullpen is set up, I'm almost more interested in quantity than, well, I want him to be good, but you know what I'm saying? I think for the money you could pay a Tanner Scott or one of these big arms, I'd rather add 2 or 3 and see if you strike gold.
To that point, the Braves have also, we're not going to talk about trade targets on this podcast, but they've also done a lot of these things by trade recently. Aaron Bummer was a trade. Pierre Johnson was a trade. Like they've done this stuff with like guys who were, Aaron Bummer had, we talked about it a lot, but had an ugly ERA, but had great peripherals. And they were like, they can find these guys. Alex has his types that he likes. And it would not surprise me, to your point, if they went out and tried to target. They might just trade for 2 guys, not sign anybody in free agency. That might happen too. It's just hard to talk about those guys if they're on somebody's roster right now.
Sure.
The rest of these names like are not as big of the names, but there are some guys who are like consistently in the top 50, 60 on free agent lists. And then at the end of this, let's do like an old friends section because there are lots of old friends available. Before we get to that, a couple of names. Carlos Estevez, 32-year-old right-hander, had a breakout year last year, mid-2s ERA, doesn't walk anybody. Paul Sewald has been a good reliever for a while now, 34-year-old guy. Last 4 years across 3 teams, like kind of been a floating guy, but low 3s ERA. And then speaking of old guys, David Robertson has been pitching in the major leagues since I was a small child. That's not true, but he's going to be 40 pretty soon. And he's legitimately been a good reliever for 15 plus years. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. He was a good reliever when I was in college. That's not an exaggeration. And he still had a 3.0 ERA this year in 72 innings for Texas at age 39. So, like, those are the kind of names we're talking about. Do you have any favorites of that group by any chance? I mean, Robertson would be very brave score being 40. Like, I'm not it's not all about age, but like that's a 1-year contract guy, almost certainly.
Yeah. This group, Paul Sewald, if you asked a Diamondbacks fan, they would tell you he is like the worst pitcher on planet Earth.
It's mixed results for team by team for Paul Sewald. That's kind of why I started laughing earlier because I knew that you were going to say something about the Diamondbacks during that stretch. But here we go.
Sewald was the one who gave up that go-ahead homer to Sean Murphy in the 9th inning. Basically ended up being the difference between Arizona getting in the playoffs and the Braves getting in the playoffs. Funny how that can kind of work. But, this group, Estevez, he kind of came out of nowhere. I think Kylie McDaniel of ESPN had a good write-up about Estevez where he was one of the free agents he would probably want to stay away from. Sewald, okay, if he's like the 3rd or 4th righty in your bullpen, he's probably fine. And Robertson, 40 years old. It's insane. I remember back in the day, Brad, on the Battery Power show, I think Robertson was connected to the Braves in free agency like 3 years ago, and we talked about it. And so, hey, man, good for him. If you're collecting millions of dollars, making 60 bullpen pitch appearances out of the bullpen a year, good for you. Hey, if the Braves want to keep their quota of 40-year-olds on the roster, then go ahead.
He's a Jesse Chavez replacement in more ways than one. But my favorite stat on my favorite little nugget about David Robertson, he got multiple Cy Young votes in 2011 with the Yankees.
Oh, wow.
2011 is a long time ago for the record, but it makes me laugh. Anyway, all right. We've gotten to the fun part of the show, and that's the old friend section. One of these is a little bit different than the others. Michael Soroka, formerly Mike Soroka, former Braves prospect turned high-end starter. Then he got hurt, of course. Our old friend Eric Cole's favorite player of all time, Mike Soroka, is a pretty interesting free agent. And of course, because we did not talk about him in the starting pitching show, people asked about that. He could still start. He was a starter part of the year this year with the White Sox, but he was much, much better as a reliever, which is interesting because he was not a guy that we thought was like a profile to be a reliever. Like some guys, when they come up as prospects, he was a control command guy, etc. But how about some stats here for you, Scott? He had 36 innings of relief work this year with the White Sox. He struck out 60 guys. And he had 20 walks, which is crazier even for Michael Soroka to walk 20 guys in 36 innings. So, like, he's changed a lot. Maybe he's a reliever moving forward. Obviously, there's a relationship there. I don't know, man. It's a very interesting profile. For me, not a starter anymore. But he might want to still start, and I'm sure someone somewhere will pay him to start. I just don't think it's going to be in Atlanta. But if if you view him as a reliever, I'm kind of in. I don't know.
I don't have a screaming hot take one way or the other on Michael
Yes, you
Soroka,
do. Come
the
on,
pitcher.
first take style.
But dude, I'm so happy for Mike that
Yeah.
he, after a double Achilles tear, I mean, dear God, man, the rehab that Soroka had to go through, a very uncommon injury for baseball players, and for him to have to do it twice is just remarkable. So good for Mike. He is going to presumably get paid a pretty nice penny this winter. And, hey, if the reunion wants to happen, I'd be very, very happy. I do agree. I tend to think he is a reliever at this point and probably not a starter. But similarly to a Jeff Hoffman type, you could always try him in a starter role again and then shift him back to the bullpen because clearly he's kind of figured something out in that role.
And unlike a lot of these guys, I said before, like he's 27. He's not 32 in the way that most of these guys are or older. So potentially an intriguing reunion there. The other three guys that are old friends, actually there's four, but the other three guys that are more serious on this list are old. And not just old friends, but old pitchers. But they were all good this year. Kenley Jansen is a free agent at age 37. Kirby Yates is a free agent at age 38. And Chris Martin, remember Chris Martin? He was quite good in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
He's now 38 as well. And all three of those guys were like capital G good last year in different spots. Kenley is not like the dominant closer anymore, but is still a good reliever. Good peripherals last year. Kirby Yates had a 1.17 ERA last season for the Rangers. Obviously not that good underlying stuff, but still that's crazy. And then Chris Martin in the last 3 years since leaving Atlanta has an ERA and a FIP in the mid twos. So like, look, they're on this list because they're related to the Braves, but they actually will all be reasonable signings even if they weren't. Like I know they're old. That's the only thing. But again, old guys don't scare Alex. So it would not surprise me if you sign any of these three, or not at all. But man, they're all kind of intriguing given their relationships.
Yeah, I think we're getting very clearly into the 1 year tier.
Yes, agreed.
Because of their ages. Kirby Yates might be able to get 2 years because of how good he was last season.
Because he was so good. Yeah, I mean, and he was the closer. By the way, he was the closer in Texas too. Like the primary. Yeah. I don't know if he won't be getting a big payday anymore, but I feel like the Braves got a little bit unlucky with Kirby Yates. And when I say that, he was incredibly dominant pre-Atlanta. They brought him in when he was hurt to rehab him and get him back. They didn't really get the best version, and now he's back. And it's like, oh man, they just missed it. But still, I mean, he's got something in his arm. It's still at 38 years old. He's not young, but
Kirby Yates was fascinating, and then we'll move on. There were nights where he was throwing an invisible baseball. Yeah. And hitters, I mean, they had no shot. And other nights, he couldn't find the plate. He was right in the middle of the plate. His splitter wasn't splitting. His fastball wasn't located, and it would be bad. But that's well said that before Atlanta, he was fantastic. Post Atlanta, the one season, he was terrific with Texas. I couldn't believe it when he was like a shoo-in for an all-star spot. It's like, really? Kirby Yates? Oh my God, his numbers, they're amazing. But yeah, Kenley Jansen, Kirby Yates, Chris Martin, I think all three at least are going to get a phone call from the Braves to varying degrees, and you kind of get an idea of what their market is and what they're looking for.
I have always been a sucker for Chris Martin. I will admit that when we used to cover him with the Braves, I've always liked him. But I mean, he had this weird journey where he went to Japan for 2 years. This is like 10 years ago now, but since he got back to America, he's been like a really, really good reliever for like 6 or 7 years in a row. So old guy. This is almost like just for laughs, but we talked about him earlier in the podcast. Will Smith's a free agent. That's more. He was not good like the other one guys were. So I'm mostly joking. But hey, he's a free agent, Scott. Just bringing it up.
5 straight years now, Will Smith has won the World Series. Will Smith, the reliever, has 3, and catcher Will Smith from the Dodgers has 2 of them. So I don't know, Brad. You sign Will Smith. No, I think it's very much time for Will Smith. He'll catch on somewhere, but I think you can pretty safely assume that unless he's sitting around for like $1 million and he's going to be like the 4th lefty in the bullpen,
Not even
I
that,
wouldn't.
I don't think.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
minor league deal would be Will Smith for me.
Sure.
And I love him forever, but yeah. And okay, I'm going to call my shot a little bit one time here, and I'm not reporting anything. I want to stress that. A guy that would make sense, given that the Braves tend to love guys who are from the area, is Buck Farmer. Buck Farmer went to high school in Rockdale County, which you don't know anything about, Scott, but that's not far from Atlanta. And he played at Georgia Tech. And last 3 seasons with the Reds, ERA in the mid-threes. He's 33 years old, veteran, not a high-end guy. Like, he would be a very cheaper option compared to these guys. But, like, if they're looking to round things out a little bit, I would like that as a option as, like, the 6th guy in the bullpen. Not a top 3 guy in the bullpen. But I'm just look, the Braves tend to find these guys that are from the area. Colin McHugh came back to Atlanta. He was from the Atlanta metro area. Buck Farmer's not Colin McHugh. He's not as good as Colin McHugh was then. But Buck Farmer would be an interesting guy. He is a free agent, 33 years old, right in that sweet spot, couple $1 million. Just saying. That's the name.
Yeah. Well, and I like it because it kind of led me to something else. But you're right. The Braves, they like their local guys. The other just trait I think it's worth pointing out, if people want to go and look into these free agents or even look into the trade market at what relievers might be available, but go to StatCast and find guys who do like 1 or 2 things really, really well. For example, when they traded for Aaron Bummer, it took like 30 seconds to look at Bummer's StatCast page. And It's like, oh my God, this is the most Alex Anthopoulos reliever in the history of Alex Anthopoulos relievers. He never gets barreled. He had a high whiff rate. Like all the things that this bullpen that Alex looks for in his bullpen, like he never looks for like contact or, he looks for stuff. And I think that if we know Alex Anthopoulos, he's going to go out and try to find maybe an imperfect reliever who does a thing or two really well. And the Braves will try to build upon those strengths and then turn him into a good reliever at maybe a fraction of the cost of one of the big names who are going to get paid 2 or 3 years and, $10 million on average.
That's a good way to put that for sure. And, Alex is always active. And I know I've said it once before on the show at least, but trade targets too. Like there could be a guy on a bad team somewhere that Alex is like, oh, I like this guy and I'm going to go get him. That is very possible. Maybe even likely that he makes a trade for someone in the bullpen. He tends to do that. But we want to at least talk about the names. We did the starting pitching show already. Sean and Steven talked about the shortstops. There'll be an outfield review of some kind in the near future about the guys who are available on the free agent market. That's the one advantage right now of it being kind of slow to bring things full circle on this episode. Most guys that were free agents are still free agents as of November 17th. So that's what we're talking about right now. And if things break, we'll always be here to react to it. Scott, is there anybody else that you want to highlight? I intentionally did not talk about Aroldis Chapman. No, thank you. But everybody else that was a relatively big name we talked about to some degree. So anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No names in particular.
Craig Kimbrell. Oh, sorry. Craig Kimbrell's the favorite.
Yeah.
Craig Kimbrell. He's cooked, by the way, I think. But hey,
probably.
come on home, Craig. It's fine.
I don't think Kimbrell was even was he with Baltimore? I don't think he even made Baltimore's postseason roster.
No, he got cut late in the year because he blew up. Like he was pitching pretty well. And he's 36 now. And look, Craig Kimbrell will forever. And I think you agree with me. Forever talked about. Craig Kimbrell was as good as any reliever has ever been in the history of baseball when he was with the Braves. I'm not exaggerating. He was that good. It's been a long time since then. People kind of forgotten. He's been kind of like a meme recently because he's been pretty bad in some spots. His good was as good as anybody's good has ever been. Just say that out loud.
If we have like young listeners or viewers of the show, go look up like Craig Kimbrell highlights on YouTube. If you didn't get to experience that in his prime.
Or his numbers. I mean, his numbers are preposterous. 5 years in Atlanta, Scott, before we sign off, a 1.43 ERA, 1.52 FIP. So because you think it was faking it with the ERA, a FIP in the 1.5s over 5 seasons. What are we talking about here? Like, he's unbelievable. Anyway,
that is
he's a free agent. Just saying his name out loud.
So maybe Craig will get like a spring training invite for old times, and he can do the rounds and sign some of his rookie cards that are floating around out there. But it's we wanted to do the show as we kind of said off the top. Relievers, they're a tough group to predict. Without knowing exactly who the Braves like, there are so many different ways they could go in free agency and with trades. But we did want to do kind of a state of the bullpen, especially without Joe Jimenez for most of, if not all of next season. And who knows, maybe Alex will throw us a bone, give us a blue square one of these days soon, and give us something to talk about transaction wise. But until then, we at least wanted to talk about as many names as possible and talk through some scenarios and possibilities.
The old blue square could be Monday morning. We'll see.
That's
Alex
fine.
is always up for a Monday morning signing, but as we record this podcast, as it's getting closer to Monday right now, we've covered a lot of ground, Scott. I appreciate you doing this. Where can folks find all of your musings on social media? Because Scott, your Indianapolis Colts got to win today, which is congratulations to you.
Yeah, baby. It is Anthony Richardson season is back on.
After a brief hiatus, he's back in the mix.
Play the 40-year-olds. It's a good thing I don't have a Colts podcast, or it would be taken off the airwaves for many reasons. But no, I am at Scott Coleman 55 on socials if you want to find me there. A big thank you to everybody who has checked out the show, and we will have plenty of shows this upcoming week. Steven and Sean do a great job. Usually it's those two, and then Brad and I do the shows. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, and hopefully we have a busy next couple of weeks and months ahead, especially as the offseason really gets going. I know it has been painfully slow across the league, but let us hope in the next, I don't know, maybe we'll speak it into existence, Brad, and get something this week. We would all be for it.
We will try our best to be sure. And yes, please follow Scott across platforms. Follow me if you'd like to at BT Rowland on the old Twitter machine. And also you can find the show at Hammer Territory on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Please subscribe to the podcast. Why would we want you to do that? Well, if you download the show, it helps us raise the reviews. And if you subscribe, the show will be delivered directly to you on the platform of your choice. So that's why we ask you to do that. Also listen to it, of course, download it, click it, watch it, however you want to do that as well. And please tell your friends about the podcast. For Scott, that's all we have today. Stay tuned for more later on this week, and we'll see you all next time.